One of the reasons why drawing or painting is really hard for beginners is because your brain is very bad at determining the relative value or color of an area in an image, depending on what that value or color is up against. What does this mean? And how does it impact our ability to draw? Let's start out with this optical illusion. Okay, this optical illusion is called the checker shadow illusion, and it was published by Edward Adelson in 1995, and he was an MIT professor of vision. And what you will notice in this image here is that it appears that box A and box B are of very different values. But the reality is they are both the same value of gray. The reason that your brain perceives these two areas to be of different value is because each of the squares are up against values that are not the same. So you can see that the A box is up against two squares that are very light, and then the B box is surrounded by squares that are darker in value. So how does this apply to a drawing or a painting? Because this works the same way with color. If you put one color up against a certain other color background, it may appear different than if it were up against a different color background. But if we're just talking about black and white, how does this apply to our drawings? I always have students who want to dive into drawings and start shading just one item or area of an artwork at a time. And this is where they run into problems because they start their shading, like let's say from the cheek outward, and they just assume that they can get an accurate value match on that cheek, but unless it's up against a true black value, then they do not know if that contrast is accurate or not. Just for example, this is an image of a drawing that is done with very low contrast, not very accurate contrast. You can see it feels kind of washed out. And this is an image of the same drawing up to full contrast. We have our whitest whites and our blackest blacks both present, and that helps all of the grays in between fall in line. So here's my tip and how I've taught my students to draw with the right amount of contrast and to train their eye. First step, create a value scale for whatever media you are using. This is a 7-value value scale, and you can see that number 1 is the lightest value we can get, number 7 is the darkest value you can get, and depending on what media you are using, your lightest and your darkest, they might look different. But when we are using these charcoal pencils, this is as light as it can get on this gray paper, and this is as dark as it can get on this gray paper. And then I have them look at their drawing and find an area that has a full range of values present, a lightest light and a darkest dark. So when we're looking at this picture of me here, you can see that in the eye area, there is a black and there's also a white. So I start by having them kind of almost imagine that they're shining a little spotlight on that area and start to shade that entire area, but making sure that they put their darkest dark, number 7 value, in the black spot. That way, they're more accurately able to judge the other values around it, and they can build outward from that area. I know this might be kind of confusing, but when you are drawing, try to avoid just shading one little thing at a time. Look for an area in your drawing that has a dark value or the darkest possible value, and also a very light value, and then try to shade all of those areas together instead of just one little piece at a time. The whole drawing should come up gradually together over time versus like a spot over here, a spot over here, a spot over here. It's one interconnected network of values, and they are all relative to one another.